I just inherited what I thought was my late uncle's worthless old cabin, a crumbling shack in the middle of nowhere that nobody wanted. Then one day, a gleaming white Tesla pulls up outside. Out steps HOA President Cordelia Ashworth, blonde, perfectly polished, designer heels sinking into my rotting porch as she bangs on my broken screen door with foreclosure papers. "You have 30 days to tear down this disgusting eyesore, or we'll demolish it ourselves and send you the bill." She's looking down at me like I'm nothing, but while she's threatening me on my own land, I open Uncle Ezra's dusty trunk and find one faded document, an 1872 railroad deed, 1,500 acres. Her entire luxury neighborhood, 300 pristine homes, perfect lawns, community pools, is illegally built on land my family has owned for over 150 years. She just threatened the wrong person. And when I decided to do something about it, karma hit them harder than they ever imagined. What would you have done? Drop your worst HOA horror stories below. Where are you watching from tonight? 2 weeks before everything changed, I was living in a cramped Columbus apartment, fixing electrical problems for people who treated me like furniture. Divorced 6 months, broke as hell, wondering if 47 was too old to start over. My ex-wife got the house, I got the debt, and my electrical contracting business was barely keeping me fed. Then Uncle Ezra died. Barely knew the man. Family black sheep who lived alone in the woods, sent Christmas cards with no return address, and cryptic notes about keeping what's ours. Last time I saw him, I was 12, and he was arguing with my dad about some old family property dispute. Called him a stubborn fool who knew too much for his own good. His lawyer called saying I'd inherited some property in rural Madison County. Sounded like a handful of worthless acres and a tax bill I couldn't afford. The 3-hour drive wound through back roads that made my pickup truck groan on every hill. When I finally found the place, my heart sank. The cabin looked like a movie prop for hillbilly horror. Sagging metal roof, windows held together with duct tape, porch steps that sagged under my weight. Paint had given up trying to stick to weathered siding decades ago. But stepping out of the truck, the silence hit me like a blessing. No traffic, no neighbors screaming through paper-thin walls, just wind whispering through pine needles, and the distant gurgle of creek water over stones. Air so clean it made my lungs ache, forest loam and wild honeysuckle instead of exhaust fumes and desperation. Inside wasn't much better. Furniture draped in dusty sheets, mouse turds scattered across warped floorboards. That particular smell of abandonment, musty wood smoke mixed with decades of solitude. But the bones were solid. Hand-hewn oak beams, fieldstone foundation, the kind of craftsmanship that died with the men who built it. Uncle Ezra's final letter sat on the kitchen table. "Sawyer, don't let them steal what's rightfully ours. Check the trunk. The truth's been waiting long enough. E.B." I spent the first week making it livable. Rewiring dangerous electrical, patching the roof, clearing out enough junk to sleep without breathing dust clouds. The nearest neighbors were supposedly some fancy development called Millbrook Estates, but thick forest blocked any view. Perfect. Maybe I could finally think straight without listening to other people's lives bleeding through apartment walls. That's when Cordelia Ashworth came calling. I was replacing rotted porch boards, hammer in hand, when designer heels clicked across my gravel driveway. The sound alone cost more than my monthly food budget. She materialized like something from a different planet. Mid-50s, helmet blonde hair that defied physics, white blazer so pristine it hurt to look at, pearl necklace catching afternoon sunlight, manicured nails drumming against leather portfolio thick as a phone book. Even her perfume smelled expensive, some floral assault that made the forest air seem thin. "Excuse me," voice like breaking crystal. "Are you the new owner of this structure?" I set down my hammer, wiping sawdust from my hands. "Sawyer Blackwood. Yeah, inherited it from my uncle." Her nose wrinkled like she'd stepped in something dead. "I'm Cordelia Ashworth, president of the Millbrook Estates Homeowners Association." She handed me a business card, raised lettering on stock thick enough to cut bread. "Our community manages 312 homes with a $2.3 million annual budget. We maintain certain standards." Good for you. The cabin violates multiple aesthetic guidelines protecting property values. The condition, the obvious maintenance failures, frankly, it's an eyesore that reflects poorly on our entire area. I glanced around at towering pines, bird songs, complete isolation from whatever McMansion paradise she represented. Lady, your neighborhood's invisible from here. Nevertheless, her smile belonged in a shark documentary. You have 30 days to remove this disgusting structure, or we'll have the county condemn it. While she delivered her threat, looking down at me like something she'd scrape off her Louboutins, Uncle Ezra's mysterious trunk sat right behind her through the open door. Time to see what truth had been waiting. 3 days after Cordelia's little visit, I learned how rich people wage war on poor folks. I was installing new electrical outlets, proper GFCI protection, everything by the book, when a white county truck crunched up my gravel driveway. Out stepped Dale Thornbury, building inspector, clipboard clutched like a shield, and sweat already beading his forehead, despite the cool morning air. Mr. Blackwood? Got some reported violations to investigate. He handed me papers thick enough to stop a bullet. 14 separate code violations, each carrying fines that made my divorce look cheap. Unpermitted electrical work, 4,000. Non-compliant septic, 12,000. Structural hazards, 18,000. Foundation issues, roofing violations, something about illegal occupancy of substandard dwelling. Total, $47,000. 60 days to fix everything or face county seizure. This is horseshit, Dale. I flipped through pages that might as well have been written in Latin. Inadequate stormwater management? I live in the middle of a damn forest. Dale avoided eye contact like a teenager caught shoplifting. Look, I just follow up on complaints. Someone reports problems, I gotta investigate. Someone named Cordelia Ashworth? His face flushed red as fresh paint. Can't discuss who files reports. After his truck disappeared down my driveway, I sat on my sagging porch steps, staring at those papers, and feeling that old familiar rage. The same helpless fury I'd felt watching lawyers gut my marriage, watching corporate clients treat me like disposable labor. People with money always found ways to crush people without it. But this time felt different. This time, I had Uncle Ezra's trunk full of secrets. I spent that night reading by lamplight. My electrical work kept the power steady, unlike some folks I could mention. The 1872 deed was just the tip of the iceberg. Survey maps from 3 different decades, all showing identical property boundaries. Tax receipts dating back generations. Every payment signed by a Blackwood. And buried at the bottom, a manila folder that made everything click. HOA correspondence 1987 to 2019. Uncle Ezra had been fighting this exact war for 32 years. Letter after letter from Millbrook Estates, demanding he cease interfering with community development. Threats about frivolous property claims if he didn't acknowledge established boundaries. His responses got shorter and angrier over time, but the stubborn bastard never surrendered, never signed anything, never backed down. The final letter was Cordelia's masterpiece, dated 6 months before Uncle Ezra died. Your harassment of residents and baseless claims have been reported to authorities. Desist immediately or face consequences. His unsent reply was penciled in the margin. You built your palace on stolen land. Bills always come due. Smart old coot knew exactly what game they were playing. Dawn found me driving through Millbrook Estates with my camera, documenting their perfect little world. My years wiring McMansions had taught me something most people don't know. Rich neighborhoods cut just as many corners as poor ones. They just hide it better behind fancy facades and political connections. Tesla charging stations without electrical permits, pool installations violating setback requirements, fence heights exceeding county limits, mailboxes mounted wrong, driveways extended past property lines, outdoor lighting bright enough to guide aircraft. But Cordelia's house was the crown jewel, a monument to expensive taste with one glaring flaw. Her Tesla charging station, sleek and modern as tomorrow, wasn't just unpermitted. According to electrical codes I knew by heart, it was a $12,000 violation, sitting pretty in her circular driveway. Here's something most folks don't realize. Code enforcement works both ways, but only if you know which buttons to push. I filed complaints on everything, 127 violations across their development, each documented with photos, measurements, and specific code citations. Requested inspection records under Freedom of Information Act. demanded explanations for why identical problems had sailed through approval during Millbrook's construction. My old laser printer worked overtime, churning out violation reports until 2 a.m. The smell of hot toner and fresh paper filled my cabin like incense at a revenge ceremony. Dale returned 3 days later, looking like he'd been chewing broken glass. "Mr. Blackwood, about these complaints you filed. Just being a good citizen, Dale. Making sure everyone follows the same rules. Look, some of these issues are historically complex. Grandfather clauses, previous approvals. Funny how those grandfather clauses only protect people who golf with county commissioners." Sweat dripped off his chin, despite the morning chill. "What if we could find some middle ground? Reduce your violations, work out a compromise." The trap was closing beautifully. "What kind of compromise?" "Your electrical work. Turns out it's mostly compliant after all. That septic system shows proper approval from 1987. Might have been a paperwork mix-up." I let him squirm for a long moment. "And the structural issues?" "Basic maintenance should handle it. Some paint, minor repairs. We could probably settle for $1,200 total." From $47,000 to $1,200, just like magic. But while Dale was learning about equal enforcement, I was discovering something that would change everything. Cordelia had made this personal, way too early in the game. Cordelia's next move proved she'd learned absolutely nothing from Dale's little lesson in equal enforcement. I was savoring morning coffee on my porch, listening to bird songs that didn't give a damn about property values, when her white Tesla carved fresh ruts in my gravel driveway. This time she brought muscle, some sharp-dressed lawyer in a midnight blue Mercedes whose hourly rate probably exceeded my monthly income. She emerged wearing what looked like designer safari gear, the kind worn by people who think roughing it means staying at a 4-star lodge. Her perfume hit me from 20 feet away, clashing with the clean smell of pine needles and morning dew. "Mr. Blackwood, we need to discuss your illegal interference with essential community infrastructure." "Morning, Cordelia. Beautiful day for making threats, isn't it?" The lawyer, Brennan Sheffield according to his embossed business card, unfolded legal papers like he was presenting surrender terms. "Sir, our investigation reveals you've been tampering with the main water line serving our community." I nearly spit coffee across my porch rail. "Tampering? I haven't touched your damn water line." "Nevertheless," Cordelia's voice could freeze antifreeze, "that line crosses your property without authorization. We're prepared to offer compensation, $500, one-time payment for a permanent easement, $500 for unlimited access to my land." These people truly believed I was born yesterday and raised stupid. "What if I decline your generous offer?" Sheffield delivered his practiced intimidation speech. "We'd pursue legal action for interference with essential services. The county takes water disruption very seriously, Mr. Blackwood." After they roared away in their German engineering, I did what any curious property owner would do. Went hunting for this mysterious water line they were sweating about. An hour of tramping through my woods revealed their little secret. 6-inch main pipe running straight through my property like an interstate highway, marked with cheerful blue flags. The real prize was the maintenance building surrounding the main junction. Concrete block structure, industrial locks, sitting pretty on my side of any reasonable property line. The kind of shed that screams, "Expensive equipment lives here." That evening found me at the courthouse, digging through dusty permit files like Uncle Ezra had taught me to do. The waterline installation story read like a bureaucratic comedy show. Original permits from 1991 showed the contractor raising red flags about property ownership, but the township was neck-deep in what they called administrative modernization, computer systems being upgraded, old records digitized, property boundaries getting lost in translation. The contractor's notes were gold, unable to contact actual property owner for easement permission. Proceeding under township guidance, that land appears to be public domain during transition period. They'd built their entire water system during the one brief window when nobody knew who owned what. Sometimes timing is everything, and sometimes it bites you in the ass 30 years later. Back home, I installed a digital flow meter at their junction box. Amazing what you can buy online these days. The numbers were eye-opening. 34,000 gallons daily, flowing through unauthorized pipes crossing my land, like I was running a charity water service. That's when I remembered something from my apprenticeship days, working with an old-timer who'd handled industrial water rights. Property ownership includes what lawyers call subsurface rights: water, minerals, everything beneath your soil. When someone runs pipes through your land without permission, they're not just trespassing. They're stealing your resources, and the law takes that seriously. I spent the next morning calculating what Millbrook Estates owed me for 33 years of unauthorized water usage. Commercial easement rates in Ohio run about 15 cents per 1,000 gallons, plus monthly access fees. Add compound interest at legal rates, and the numbers got beautiful fast. $192,000 in back payments, plus ongoing monthly rent. Sheffield's business card was still on my kitchen table, so I gave him a call. "Mr. Sheffield? Sawyer Blackwood. I've reconsidered that easement discussion." "Excellent. My clients will be pleased you're approaching this reasonably." "Oh, I'm being very reasonable. I'll grant your water easement for fair market value." "Which would be?" $192,000 in back payments, plus $500 monthly going forward. The silence stretched longer than my last marriage. Finally, "Mr. Blackwood, no court would support such excessive. Actually, property courts love clear documentation. I've got flow meters, installation permits, and 30 years of unauthorized usage. Feel lucky about those odds? We'll need time to research alternatives." "Clock's ticking, counselor. Compound interest never sleeps." That afternoon, my phone rang with an unexpected voice from the past. Maya Restrepo, union electrician I'd worked with years back, had seen my name bouncing around Facebook posts about HOA troubles. Turns out her union was investigating wage theft by contractors who'd built half of Millbrook Estates. "Sawyer, you still got that photographic memory for electrical systems? What kind of wage theft are we talking about?" 340 grand worth, and we need someone who understands how these fancy developments get wired. Sometimes the universe delivers exactly the allies you need. Cordelia's third attack hit where I least expected, through the grapevine of small-town gossip, where rich people think they own the narrative along with everything else. Started at Betty's Diner on a Tuesday morning. I was working through scrambled eggs and coffee strong enough to wake the dead, when conversations around me shifted like wind before a storm. Heard my name whispered between bites of toast, words like unstable and violent tendencies floating through bacon grease and cigarette smoke that clung to everything like small-town memories. By lunch, every mailbox in 3 counties had received the Millbrook Estates newsletter, a masterpiece of character assassination titled "Protecting Our Families from Dangerous Elements." Cordelia had crafted her poison carefully, never mentioning my name while painting a picture of some deranged hermit threatening innocent families. References to recent arrivals with documented mental health issues, individuals with histories of financial failure, and potential violence against law-abiding homeowners. The witch had done her homework. Somehow discovered my divorce details, my struggling electrical business, even the fact that I'd seen a therapist after my ex-wife emptied our accounts and disappeared with her yoga instructor. All twisted into evidence that I was some hillbilly psychopath plotting against suburban paradise. Facebook exploded like a social media bomb. Concerned for our children's safety, property values under attack, should we call the sheriff? Posts shared and reshared until half of Madison County thought I was brewing meth and planning mass murder from my forest hideout. But Cordelia made one beautiful mistake. She forgot that working people don't appreciate being talked down to by pearl-wearing princesses. Maya Restrepo showed up that Thursday evening, union coveralls still dusty from a long day pulling wire, carrying beer that tasted like friendship and revenge mixed together. We sat on my porch watching fireflies dance between pine trees while she told me about her cousin who'd been screwed over by Pinnacle Construction. 43 guys got robbed on that Millbrook job, she said, crushing an empty can with calloused hands. Promised union wages, paid piecework, then vanished when payday came. $340,000 in stolen money. The smell of her Marlboro mixed with wild honeysuckle while she explained how these things worked. Federal investigators loved cases involving rich developments built on stolen labor. Companies that thought political connections made them bulletproof, suddenly finding themselves explaining missing money to federal judges. Plus, my cousin Amanda works Channel 6 News. She's been hunting for a David versus Goliath story that'll make her career. But Maya's best news was still coming. Funny thing about construction workers, We talked to each other. Turns out 3 guys from that Millbrook job recognized Cordelia's name from your Facebook drama. What do you mean? Means she wasn't just some innocent HOA president. She was Pinnacle's corporate lawyer, the one who structured their payment system to screw workers out of overtime and benefits. Had her fingerprints all over the contracts that stole our money. Holy shit. The perfect neighborhood queen wasn't just defending stolen land. She'd personally designed the theft that built it. Maya's network came together like a working-class Justice League. Construction workers who remembered Cordelia's legal maneuvering. Electricians who'd been cheated on overtime. Plumbers who'd installed inferior materials while Cordelia's contracts charged premium prices. All of them, waiting years for someone to crack the system that had screwed them over. The counterattack was beautiful to watch. While Cordelia spread poison about my mental health, I documented every corner Pinnacle had cut during construction. Electrical panels below code standards. Water lines installed with plastic instead of required copper. Foundation work that violated specifications, but somehow passed inspection. Betty Kowalski, who'd overheard Cordelia call me inbred white trash during the morning coffee rush, started sharing that story with every customer who'd listen. How this fancy development lady looked down on service people like they were trained animals performing for her entertainment. Father Miguel Santos worked it into Sunday sermons without naming names. Some folks think money makes them superior to their neighbors, but scripture says pride comes before the fall. The tide was shifting, but Cordelia still had her Facebook army and newsletter propaganda machine. What I needed was something that would destroy her credibility completely. That's when Amanda Clark called about the wage theft story, and Maya suggested we dig deeper into Cordelia's past legal work. If she structured Pinnacle's contracts, Maya said, there might be more companies, more stolen wages, more victims. I spent that night in Uncle Ezra's trunk, looking for financial records I'd missed. Hidden in the back, wrapped in plastic, was a manila envelope labeled Corporate Records 1985 to 2020. Inside were documents that made my hands shake. Not just HOA financials, but incorporation papers, legal contracts, financial statements going back decades. Uncle Ezra hadn't just been fighting a property battle, he'd been tracking a criminal conspiracy. And Cordelia Ashworth wasn't just the HOA president. She was the architect of a system that had been stealing from working people and landowners for 35 years. Uncle Ezra's secret envelope hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. I'd been expecting old financial records, maybe some HOA correspondence. Instead, spread across my kitchen table, under the flickering overhead light, were incorporation papers that made my coffee go cold in my hands. Rural Development Holdings, LLC, founded 1985, with Cordelia Ashworth listed as founding legal partner. Not some innocent HOA president. Not some recent arrival seeking rural peace. She'd been running this scam for 35 fucking years. My hands shook as I read through corporate filings showing a pattern that made my skin crawl. Target elderly landowners, create legal pressure through code enforcement, acquire property below market value through administrative confusion. 16 separate properties across 3 counties, all following the same playbook. The 1986 township computer modernization that screwed up my family's deed records, planned, coordinated, designed to create enough chaos that rural development could slip stolen land through the system. Cordelia hadn't just taken advantage of bureaucratic mistakes, she'd created them. Uncle Ezra's handwriting covered every margin like angry prayers. Ashworth represents 7 different shell companies, all registered to same P.O. box. Township assessor approved subdivisions without legal owner consent. Same pattern every time. Elderly owner dies, property gets lost in computer system, magically reappears under development ownership. The smell of old paper and Uncle Ezra's pipe tobacco still lingering in that envelope, while I discovered I was holding evidence of the biggest land theft conspiracy in county history. Hundreds of acres, millions in stolen property value, dozens of families who'd lost their legacy to legal paperwork designed to confuse and intimidate. But the document that made me want to throw up was a private contract between Cordelia and Sterling Communities, dated just 2 years ago. She wasn't just collecting her HOA president stipend. She was receiving $2,400 monthly in secret consulting payments for legal services never disclosed to residents. 6 years of double-dipping from community funds, while homeowners paid escalating fees for services that cost half what Sterling charged. This woman had been stealing from both sides of every transaction. I photographed everything with 3 different cameras, hands trembling so badly I had to retake half the shots. Uploaded copies to secure cloud storage through Maya's IT contact. Made physical backups hidden in different locations around my property. Uncle Ezra had died before he could expose this conspiracy, but he'd left me a roadmap to burn it all down. The scope made my head spin. I wasn't fighting for my family's land anymore. I was holding evidence of systematic fraud that had been operating under everyone's noses since Reagan was president. Every development permit, every legal property transfer, every HOA fee payment, all feeding a machine designed to enrich Cordelia while screwing everyone else. My phone buzzed. Maya texting that Amanda Clark wanted to meet tomorrow. Says if your evidence checks out, this could be career-making investigative journalism. I walked out to my porch, looking down through pine branches toward Millbrook Estate's perfect streetlights. 300 families paying monthly fees to live on stolen land, getting overcharged by management companies while their HOA president skimmed secret profits. Most had no idea they were victims of the same system that had robbed my family. The legal implications crashed over me like ice water. I didn't just own the land under their houses. I owned leverage that could topple a criminal enterprise reaching into county government and construction companies across the region. Evidence that could send people to federal prison and recover millions in stolen assets. Judge Patricia Moreno was about to have the most interesting consultation of her retirement. Uncle Ezra had spent 3 decades collecting this ammunition, waiting for someone who could fire it properly. Cordelia Ashworth had just threatened the one person who could destroy everything she'd built. Judge Patricia Moreno's retirement had been boring her to tears, which explained why she practically purred when I spread Uncle Ezra's criminal evidence across her mahogany desk. "Holy Mary, Mother of Christ," she breathed, scanning corporate documents through reading glasses that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I haven't seen systematic fraud this beautiful since I sent that county commissioner to federal prison in '98. Her home office reeked of expensive leather and coffee that probably cost more per pound than my hourly wage, but her enthusiasm was infectious as hell. She'd agreed to this consultation as a favor to Maya's union, but within minutes she was yanking reference books off shelves like a woman possessed. "Here's your nuclear option, Mr. Blackwood. You could legally demand immediate evacuation of all 300 homes. But that's not justice. That's just revenge with a legal stamp." The strategy she outlined made my head spin with its elegant brutality. Establish legitimate ground rent at market rates, force full financial disclosure, then sit back and watch while their own greed destroyed them. When criminals try to cover up instead of coming clean, they always make fatal mistakes. Ground rent versus property rent. Most people don't know the difference, but it's everything. She poured coffee that smelled like heaven and explained how land use rights work differently from housing ownership. You charge for dirt, not buildings. Residents can negotiate purchase options or fight management company theft without losing their homes. The numbers made my divorce settlement look like pocket change. $1,200 per month per home was fair market rate for commercial land leases in central Ohio, roughly what residents already paid in HOA fees. But applied to 312 homes, that meant $4.4 million annually versus Sterling's current $2.3 million skim operation. Maya arrived that afternoon with Marcus Wright, investigative journalist who looked like he survived on black coffee and pure moral outrage. His laptop had seen more corruption than a Chicago alderman, and his recording equipment suggested this wasn't his first rodeo exposing rural land theft. Maya says you've got documentation proving systematic property fraud going back to the Reagan administration? 3 hours of cross-referencing corporate filings with construction permits revealed a conspiracy that made Watergate look like shoplifting. Marcus photographed everything with professional precision, while Maya sketched power structure diagrams on coffee-stained napkins, her electrician's brain mapping criminal networks like complex wiring systems. "This isn't local corruption anymore," Marcus said, the smell of his chain smoking mixing with pine sap from my wood stove. "Rural Development Holdings connects to shell companies in 3 counties. We're looking at potential federal charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, maybe RICO if we can prove ongoing conspiracy." That evening brought Father Miguel Santos with fresh coffee and 20 years of wisdom mediating neighbor disputes gone nuclear. His pipe tobacco scented my cabin like old churches, his calm presence steadying my growing rage at the scope of what we'd uncovered. Truth-telling requires community healing, he said, studying legal documents with the careful attention of someone who'd watched greed destroy too many families. But most homeowners are victims here too, separating innocent residents from criminal leadership. That's where real justice lives. He volunteered his church as neutral ground for community meetings once the legal earthquake started. Help families understand purchase options, negotiate payment plans, anything that kept people in their homes while dismantling the theft machine that had been robbing everyone. The next morning's surveyor crew worked like military engineers, using GPS technology to establish property boundaries that would survive any court challenge. The satisfying ping of steel stakes driven into rocky soil marked the exact 1,500-acre boundary encompassing every inch of Millbrook Estates. Property disputes evaporate when everyone can see precisely where lines are, the lead surveyor grinned, sweat beading his forehead despite morning chill. But the real satisfaction came from installing my security network. Trail cameras covering key access points, utility monitoring equipment tracking every gallon and kilowatt crossing my land. Maya's IT contact helped set up documentation systems that would automatically record any harassment attempts or utility theft. Marcus spent the weekend interviewing construction workers who'd been screwed by Pinnacle and related companies, building a victim database that read like a federal prosecutor's dream case. His editor was already clearing front page space for what looked like career-making investigative journalism. Judge Moreno crafted legal notices with surgical precision, establishing ground rent while offering reasonable settlement paths, 30 days for residents to acknowledge reality and begin negotiations, certified mail to every homeowner individually, making it impossible for criminal leadership to control the narrative or intimidate families into silence. The coalition was locked and loaded. Evidence bulletproof, allies positioned, legal strategy designed to give criminals exactly enough rope to hang themselves. But late that night, staring at Millbrook's perfect streetlights through my cabin windows, I felt something unexpected. Sympathy for the families who'd bought homes in good faith, never knowing their dream community was built on decades of theft. Time to introduce Cordelia to consequences while protecting the innocent people she'd been robbing along with everyone else. Cordelia's panic response came exactly 48 hours after 312 certified letters landed in Millbrook mailboxes, and it was even more desperate than I'd hoped. My trail cameras caught her white Tesla prowling my property line at 3 a.m., headlights cutting through forest darkness like searchlights hunting for weaknesses. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, engine running, probably making frantic phone calls to lawyers who were charging emergency consultation rates to deliver bad news. The emergency HOA meeting she called for that Thursday night was pure theater. I parked across the street from their community center, watching residents file in with grim faces and certified letters clutched like evidence in murder trials. Through the windows, I could see Cordelia pacing at the front of the room like a caged animal, her designer composure finally cracking under pressure. Maya's union contact had wired the building for electrical work 6 months earlier and accidentally left behind some very sensitive recording equipment. What we captured was better than Christmas morning. These demands are completely frivolous. Cordelia's voice carried through expensive sound systems designed for elegant community gatherings, not criminal meltdowns. This Blackwood character is clearly unstable, trying to exploit good people with fraudulent legal claims. But the residents weren't buying her performance anymore. Mrs. Patterson, a retired teacher whose husband had fought in Korea, stood up with the kind of backbone that wins wars. Cordelia, I've read these documents 3 times. This man has railroad deeds from 1872, tax receipts going back generations, and survey maps that show our entire neighborhood sitting on his family land. What exactly makes his claims fraudulent? The legal technicalities are extremely complex. Then explain them. This from Tom Rodriguez, a plumber who'd helped build half the houses in the room. Because I'm looking at construction permits that show our water system was installed without proper easement rights. Either this Blackwood guy owns the land, or he doesn't. Which is it? The meeting dissolved into chaos when Diane Peterson, the HOA treasurer, dropped her own bombshell. She'd been quietly investigating Sterling Community's billing practices and discovered what Uncle Ezra had suspected for years: systematic overcharging that amounted to theft. Sterling has been skimming approximately $180,000 annually from our community budget, Diane announced, her voice shaking with rage. Services we thought cost $1,200 were actually costing $600. The difference went into management company profits and undisclosed consulting fees. The room erupted. Residents who'd been paying increasing fees for decreasing services suddenly understood they'd been victims of the same system that had stolen land from farming families. Cordelia tried to regain control, but her authority had evaporated like morning mist. Furthermore, Diane continued, I've discovered that our HOA president has been receiving $2,400 monthly in unreported consulting payments from Sterling. Payments that were never disclosed to this board or our residents. That's when Cordelia made her fatal mistake. Instead of damage control, she went nuclear. You people don't understand the complexities of community management. Without proper leadership, this development would collapse into chaos. I've protected your property values for years while dealing with threats from unstable individuals who... Ma'am, you just admitted to taking secret payments from a company that's been stealing from us. Tom's voice cut through her hysteria like a blade. That's called embezzlement where I come from. Within hours, my security cameras were documenting escalating harassment. Anonymous calls to county health departments claiming my cabin was a public health hazard. Fake online reviews attacking my electrical business with claims of shoddy work and safety violations. Someone even tried pressuring Maya's union with complaints about outside agitators interfering in community affairs. But the most desperate move came through Devin Ashcroft, private investigator, who'd been hired to dig up dirt that could destroy my credibility. He spent 3 days interviewing my ex-wife, former clients, even my high school teachers, looking for anything that could paint me as unstable or dishonest. What he found was embarrassingly clean. Messy divorce, sure, but no criminal history, no bankruptcies, no history of mental illness beyond depression counseling that half the country could claim. Devin's report to Cordelia was apparently so disappointing that she refused to pay his full fee. The real entertainment came when Sheffield filed emergency motions claiming adverse possession, arguing that 30 years of continuous occupation by HOA residents established legal ownership rights that trumped original deeds. Judge Moreno's response was a legal masterpiece that left Sheffield looking like a first-year law student who'd skipped property law classes. Her counterfiling demolished adverse possession claims with surgical precision, pointing out that adverse possession requires the true owner's knowledge and acquiescence, neither of which applied when someone actively pays taxes and maintains ownership. Adverse possession doesn't work when the rightful owner has been continuously fighting to maintain his property rights, she wrote. Mr. Blackwood's uncle spent 30 years documenting objections to unauthorized development. That's the opposite of acquiescence. But Cordelia's most revealing mistake was what Marcus discovered through public records requests: 6 years of unreported consulting income that triggered IRS fraud investigations. When criminals panic, they always make the one error that destroys them completely. Time was running out for damage control, and everyone could smell the desperation. Cordelia's final gambit proved that cornered criminals always choose destruction over surrender. The smear campaign launched on a Monday morning, with coordinated precision that would have impressed military strategists. Regional TV stations received press packets portraying me as an opportunistic outsider exploiting elderly homeowners, complete with carefully edited photos making my cabin look like a methamphetamine operation, and my property appear to border a children's playground. Channel 6's morning show featured Cordelia in a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, dabbing tears with tissues while describing how this disturbed individual was threatening the safety and security of innocent families. Her performance was Oscar-worthy, concerned citizen protecting vulnerable seniors from a predatory land grab scheme. These poor residents bought homes in good faith, she told anchor Jim Morrison, her voice quavering with manufactured emotion. Now they're being terrorized by someone with a documented history of financial instability and mental health issues. The Facebook group Millbrook Residents Against Predatory Claims exploded overnight to 4,000 members, flooded with posts from concerned citizens who'd never set foot in Madison County, but felt compelled to defend property values against hillbilly terrorists. Shared photos of my cabin next to mansion listings, creating visual narratives about protecting the American dream from fraudulent schemes. But Marcus Wright had been investigating longer than Cordelia realized, and his research revealed the fatal flaw in her narrative. "Funny thing about consulting payments," he said, showing me bank records obtained through FOIA requests. "When someone receives unreported income for 6 years, the IRS takes that personally, especially when those payments come from companies billing taxpayers for inflated services." Cordelia's secret $2,400 monthly payments from Sterling Communities weren't just undisclosed conflict of interest. They were unreported income, totaling over $170,000. Tax evasion that would make federal prosecutors salivate, especially when connected to systematic fraud involving multiple shell companies. The investigation web was expanding faster than Cordelia could contain it. Rural Development Holdings connected to Pinnacle Construction, which connected to Sterling Communities, which connected to 3 other management companies operating in 7 counties, all featuring the same pattern: target rural properties, create administrative confusion, acquire land through questionable legal maneuvers. Marcus's editor had cleared the entire front page for what they were calling the biggest corruption story in Central Ohio since the Cohengate scandal. Federal investigators were already reviewing evidence packages that Maya's union had compiled, and the Department of Labor was opening formal investigations into wage theft allegations. Meanwhile, community resistance was building in directions Cordelia hadn't anticipated. Father Miguel's coffee meetings at the church became informal town halls, where Millbrook residents could discuss options without HOA intimidation. Diane Peterson organized financial literacy sessions, helping families understand the difference between ground rent and property ownership, mortgage options for land purchase, and legal rights when management companies overcharge for services. "Most folks just want to keep their homes and stop getting robbed by Sterling," Diane explained during one session, her treasurer's precision making complex financial concepts accessible to retirees who'd trusted the wrong people with their life savings. "This isn't about punishing homeowners, it's about stopping the theft." Betty Kowalski's diner became unofficial headquarters for construction workers, sharing stories about Pinnacle and related companies. The coffee shop bulletin board filled with contact information for federal investigators, labor lawyers, and victim advocacy groups. What started as individual grievances was becoming organized resistance against systematic exploitation. But Cordelia's most destructive move targeted the wrong person entirely. She hired Devin Ashcroft to investigate Maya's union activities, hoping to find evidence of outside agitation or professional troublemaking that could discredit our entire coalition. Devin spent 2 weeks digging through Maya's background, interviewing employers and union colleagues, looking for anything that could paint her as a radical activist with ulterior motives. What he discovered instead was a decorated electrical worker with 15 years of spotless service, safety awards from multiple employers, and a reputation for helping younger workers navigate apprenticeship programs. Devin's report to Cordelia was apparently so positive that she accused him of being compromised by union bribes. That's when Devin made the phone call that ended Cordelia's campaign. "Mr. Wright, this is Devin Ashcroft, private investigator. I think you need to know what Cordelia Ashworth just asked me to fabricate about Maya Restrepo." Marcus recorded every word of Devin's account, Cordelia demanding he create false evidence of union corruption, offering additional payment for testimony that could discredit Maya's credibility, threatening to ruin his investigative business if he didn't manufacture the dirt she needed. Conspiracy charges just upgraded to witness tampering and obstruction of justice. The final community meeting before my town hall appearance was held at Father Miguel's church, packed with residents who'd finally seen through Cordelia's manipulation. The vote was unanimous. Negotiate directly with me for reasonable land purchase options, while demanding criminal prosecution of everyone who'd been stealing from the community. Cordelia Ashworth had declared war on the wrong coalition. Time to finish what Uncle Ezra started. The township meeting room hadn't seen crowds like this since the factory closure of '89. 187 people, crammed into a space designed for 60, with overflow crowds spilling into hallways and parking lots, where Channel 6 had set up live broadcast equipment. The air inside felt electric with nervous tension, coffee breath and anxious sweat, mixing with the musty smell of decades-old carpet that had witnessed countless bureaucratic battles, but never anything approaching this scale of community drama. I arrived early, carrying a leather portfolio that contained everything: original deeds, survey maps, financial records, and Marcus's investigative files documenting 30 years of systematic theft. Judge Moreno sat in the front row, her presence lending legal gravitas that made county commissioners visibly uncomfortable. Cordelia swept in fashionably late, accompanied by Sheffield and two other lawyers whose hourly rates could have funded small governments. She'd chosen a navy suit that screamed, trustworthy professional, but her eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal, calculating escape routes. Commissioner Earl Hoffmaster called for order with a gabble that sounded like gunshots in the packed space. "We're here to address property disputes between Millbrook Estates HOA and Mr. Sawyer Blackwood. Ms. Ashworth, you requested this public forum." Cordelia's PowerPoint presentation was a masterclass in misdirection and emotional manipulation. Slides showing property value charts, photographs of happy families, testimonials from concerned residents about the devastating impact of frivolous legal terrorism on our peaceful community. "This is fundamentally about protecting the American dream," she declared, her voice carrying through sound systems designed for municipal announcements, not criminal defense speeches. Hard-working families who invested their life savings in homes that represent security, stability, and hope for their children's future. She painted me as an opportunistic outsider, exploiting legal technicalities to destroy innocent lives. Her words carefully crafted to avoid mentioning the inconvenient reality of whose land everyone was actually sitting on. But when she finished her performance and opened the floor for questions, the room shifted like a weather front moving through. Mrs. Patterson stood first, her retired teacher authority cutting through political theater like a blade. "Miss Ashworth, I've read Mr. Blackwood's documentation extensively. Railroad deeds from 1872, continuous tax payments by his family, survey maps confirming property boundaries. What specific evidence proves his claims are fraudulent? The legal complexities require professional interpretation. I spent 40 years teaching high school students to analyze primary sources," Mrs. Patterson interrupted. "These documents appear authentic and comprehensive. Either Mr. Blackwood owns this land legally, or he doesn't. Which is it?" Tom Rodriguez rose from the middle section, his plumber's common sense cutting through legal double talk. "More importantly, why didn't anyone tell us about the unreported consulting payments you've been receiving from Sterling Communities? $2,400 a month for 6 years. That's over $170,000 in secret income from the company that's been overcharging us." The room erupted in angry murmurs. Residents who'd been paying increasing HOA fees while receiving decreasing services suddenly understood they'd been funding Cordelia's private enrichment scheme, along with management company theft. Diane Peterson delivered the killing blow with treasurer's precision. "I've completed independent audits of our community finances. Sterling Communities has systematically overcharged our HOA approximately $180,000 annually for the past decade. Services we believed cost $1,200 were actually costing $600. The difference funded management profits and undisclosed consulting fees." Cordelia tried desperately to regain control. "You people don't understand community management complexities. Without professional oversight, property values would collapse. I've protected this development from numerous threats." "Ma'am," Sheriff Daniel Rodriguez interrupted from the back of the room, his uniform lending authority that silenced the crowd instantly. "You just acknowledged receiving undisclosed payments from a vendor billing your community. That's textbook embezzlement." The moment of perfect silence stretched like held breath before Commissioner Hoffmaster spoke the words that changed everything. "Ms. Ashworth, in light of documented evidence presented tonight, the county acknowledges Mr. Blackwood's legitimate property ownership claims. Furthermore, we're referring financial irregularities involving HOA management to appropriate state and federal authorities." Judge Moreno stood with the slow dignity of someone who'd spent decades watching justice unfold in courtrooms. "For the record, Mr. Blackwood owns this land legally, completely and indisputably. The only remaining question is whether this community chooses reasonable negotiation or court-ordered resolution. Cordelia's final meltdown was captured by every camera in the room. She screamed about conspiracies between old boy networks and outside agitators, accused commissioners of bias and corruption, and stormed toward the exit while kicking over a trash can in full view of live television coverage. The township voted 4-1 to facilitate formal mediation, establishing 30-day negotiation periods and temporary ground rent of $400 monthly during settlement discussions. But the most satisfying moment came when residents voted 6-1 to remove Cordelia from HOA presidency, effective immediately. Justice tastes sweeter when it's served in public. 5 months later, I was standing on my renovated porch, watching the sunrise paint gold across a valley, where everything had changed for the better. The final settlement had taken 3 months of mediation that proved Father Miguel's wisdom about community healing. Millbrook Estates residents purchased land rights for $8, $7 million, financed through municipal bonds that spread payments over 15 years at rates lower than most mortgages. Monthly ground rent dropped to $200 per home during the payment period, less than most families spent on cable television. I kept 347 acres surrounding my cabin, including the forest where Uncle Ezra had walked and planned for 30 years. His grave now sits under a massive oak tree with a granite marker reading, "Ezra Blackwood, he never surrendered." The old man would have loved seeing his battle finally won. Sterling communities disappeared overnight once federal investigators started asking uncomfortable questions about inflated billing and skimmed profits. The new resident-managed HOA, led by Diane Peterson and Tom Rodriguez, cut community expenses by 40%, while improving services through local contractors who actually lived in the area they served. Cordelia Ashworth relocated to Florida after her IRS settlement consumed most of her assets, and her law license got suspended pending criminal investigations. Last I heard, she was selling real estate in Tampa and driving a Honda Civic instead of a Tesla. Funny how quickly life can humble people who think money makes them untouchable. The $2.1 million I invested in township infrastructure improvements funded road repairs, upgraded water systems, and high-speed internet that brought the entire county into the digital age. Betty's Diner got a new roof and kitchen equipment that made her famous biscuits taste even better, if that was possible. But the project that meant the most was the Blackwood Community Center, built with settlement funds and designed by residents who understood what rural communities actually need. Not another sterile municipal building, but a space where farmers could host harvest festivals, kids could learn trade skills, and families could gather without driving 30 miles to find somewhere affordable. The annual Heritage Days Festival celebrates regional history that goes deeper than suburban developments and HOA regulations. Local craftsmen demonstrate blacksmithing, woodworking, and electrical skills that built this area before corporate developers discovered it. Maya teaches apprenticeship workshops for teenagers who want careers that can't be outsourced overseas. The Ezra Blackwood Memorial Scholarship sends 2 students annually to trade schools where they learn skills that matter: welding, plumbing, electrical work, carpentry. Real jobs that build communities instead of extracting wealth from them. Uncle Ezra would have appreciated the irony that his final victory funded opportunities for young people Cordelia's crowd had always looked down on. My electrical contracting business expanded beyond anything I'd imagined during those dark divorce days. Turns out there's huge demand for honest contractors who treat customers with respect, charge fair prices, and understand that good work speaks louder than marketing budgets. I've got more projects than I can handle, all from word-of-mouth recommendations in communities where reputation matters more than advertising. Amanda Clark's investigative series won a regional journalism award and sparked federal investigations that recovered millions in stolen wages for construction workers across 3 counties. Marcus Wright's follow-up articles documented how rural land rights abuse connects to broader patterns of corporate extraction that leave local communities poorer while enriching distant investors. The personal changes surprised me most. I'm dating Amanda now. Turns out shared battles against corruption make excellent foundations for relationships built on mutual respect instead of shared debt. My renovated cabin combines modern amenities with historical character. Solar panels humming quietly where Uncle Ezra's old generator used to roar. Every morning I drink coffee on my porch, while watching deer graze in meadows that belong to my family again. The American flag flies beside a newly planted oak tree that will shade future generations of Blackwoods, who'll never have to fight the battles Uncle Ezra and I fought. Remember, corrupt systems only survive when good people stay silent. But when neighbors support each other and regular folks refuse to be intimidated by money and lawyers, justice still works in America. Drop a comment sharing your worst HOA nightmare. I read every single one, and some of your stories make mine look like minor parking disputes. And if watching bullies get what they deserve makes your day brighter, smash that subscribe button. We're just getting started exposing how ordinary people can fight back against systems designed to crush them. Sometimes David doesn't just beat Goliath. Sometimes he becomes Goliath's landlord.